Well, welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. The United States and Israel are intensifying military pressure on Iran. Israel says the attacks have taken out 80% of Iran's air defenses and 60% of its missile launchers.
Both countries are prepared to keep fighting just as long as it takes. Joshua Swanson brings us the story from Jerusalem.
In Washington, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the United States is prepared for a prolonged confrontation with Iran and has the military resources to sustain it.
We've got no shortage of munitions. Our stockpiles of defensive and offensive weapons allow us to sustain this campaign as long as we need to.
According to Reuters, the joint U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran is now entering a second phase, focusing on ballistic missile facilities buried deep underground. The war is nearing the end of its first week after initial strikes reportedly killed multiple senior Iranian leaders and sparked a wider regional confrontation as Iran responded with attacks on Israel and strikes on other countries in the Gulf and Iraq. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations says the international community must recognize the broader threat posed by Tehran.
Iran has struck more Arab countries than Israel has in its entire existence. This is a regime going down and trying to set the entire region on fire as it falls. It will not work.
The Israeli military says it has already destroyed hundreds of Iranian above-ground missile launchers capable of hitting Israeli cities. In a statement yesterday, the Israel Defense Forces issued an evacuation warning to civilians near Tehran ahead of new strikes. Urgent warning to all individuals located in the Abbasabad industrial area and also the Shenzar industrial area near Sharifabad in eastern Pakdasht. In the coming hours, the IDF will operate in the area to strike military infrastructure of the Iranian regime.
We will dismantle them. We will finish this job.
As the conflict widens, Iran is also accused of striking still another country in the region, Israeli ally Azerbaijan.
Today, a terrorist act was committed by Iran against the territory of Azerbaijan and the state of Azerbaijan. The targets of the attack were civilian facilities. The state of Azerbaijan strongly condemns this heinous terrorist act.
A new front could also be forming along Iran's western border. Regional sources say Washington and Jerusalem have quietly approached Kurdish leaders in Iraq and among Iran's Kurdish opposition groups about opening another front against Tehran. Along the mountainous frontier between Iraq and Iran, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters are reportedly mobilizing as American and Israeli airstrikes weaken Iranian positions in the region. Iran has already responded by striking Kurdish headquarters inside Iraqi Kurdistan. Security concerns are also affecting daily life here in Jerusalem. Authorities have temporarily closed the Temple Mount and other holy sites in the Old City to all worshippers from every faith.
The Homefront Command directives called for the temporary closure of holy sites here in the Old City of Jerusalem, including the Western Wall and the Temple Mount. These precautions already proved to be necessary, as we've seen an Iranian warhead land just a few hundred meters from the holy sites only a number of days ago during Ramadan.
Israel has also targeted Hezbollah positions in Lebanon as tensions are rising along Israel's northern border. Nearly 500,000 Hezbollah supporters evacuated southern Lebanon, while Israeli forces launched 24 attacks in the last 24 hours. Israeli leaders say the coming days could determine whether the war remains contained or pulls more nations into a widening Middle East conflict. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Nahon, joins us now from New York. So, Ambassador, what's the mood like in the UN right now? What's the overall feeling about this war?
Thank you for having me, Gordon. So, at the UN, what we are seeing now is remarkable. We're seeing Arab countries lining up to attack Iran. You know, for years I've been here in this institution, and it was in Israel and the US. And all of a sudden you see Gulf countries like Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Saudis blaming Iran for their aggression. And I think it shows that today people realize that Iran, they are in a mode of desperation. They panic. That's why they attack multiple targets, not only in Israel, but in the entire region. And this week, they also attacked Cyprus, a EU member state, and Turkey, NATO member. So, you know, we know that they're under a lot of pressure. We have to be prepared for more attacks in different locations. It's not over yet. We have achieved a lot. We are moving forward, Gordon, but still, we have a lot to accomplish in the near future.
Do these fractured attacks show that there really isn't a chain of command, that each one of the missile launchers gets to pick their own targets? Or is there some kind of strategy here? Does Iran really want to have a much wider war?
Well, I think they made a huge mistake, a foolish one. They thought that by attacking the Gulf countries, they will cause those countries to come to the U.S. and pressure the U.S. to stop the attack. What happened was exactly the opposite. The countries in the Gulf came to Israel and the U.S., and they are telling us now, keep going, finish the job. We want to see, what we can do to help you. And it was a grave mistake from the Iranian side. And I think for us, it's a great opportunity, not only for this war, but also for the day after, hopefully to expand the Abraham Accords when we see that we have to stand together against the radical forces of Iran.
Let's talk about the day after and what that would likely look like. And I know it's hard to see into that, but right now it looks like the Revolutionary Guard still has control of the civilian population. The clerics are trying to elect a new Ayatollah. It looks like Khomeini's son is the choice. How organized is that, and can civilians with no weapons stand against that kind of regime?
Well, first, I can tell you that the regime, if it will stay in power, which I hope they will not stay in power, will not be the same regime. They will not have the same capabilities to threaten Israel, the U.S., and other countries in the region. And I think the people of Iran, what happened last time they went to the street, they were massacred brutally. So they need more confidence. I think now they're starting to build that confidence, seeing the U.S. and Israel, controlling the air of Iran completely. We have full air superiority. And I think the time will come for them to go back to the streets and to take control of their future. I think it's still early, but once we will continue to target the regime headquarters and the regime facilities, hopefully the people will go out to the streets again.
It looks like that there's complete air dominance right now. How much have the Israeli-U.S. strikes, how successful have they been, and what can we anticipate happening in the near future?
So, in only 1 week, it's like the story of the creation, but in 1 week, we actually abolished the Navy of Iran, the Air Force of Iran. We targeted most of the ballistic missiles, not all of them. They still have, launching capabilities. And that's why today in Israel, we are still have to be in shelters for most of the days, but it's improving. I think in the next few days, it will be harder and harder for them to launch missiles to Israel and to other countries. So I think it looks good, but I have to mention that we need more time. We cannot end now. We cannot finish now. We are in the middle. We need more time to dismantle this war machine.
You've said, and I applaud you for saying it, we will finish this job. From Israel's standpoint, I assume that means there cannot be a radical theocracy in control of the oil wealth of Iran, that it seems that the regime itself is a weapon of destruction and aimed right at Israel and right at the United States. So is regime change part of this? Is that what you mean by finishing the job?
We definitely want to see a regime change, and we will create the conditions for that. But that's for the Iranian people to actually to lead it. So we can take the chains and actually allow them to take control of the future of Iran, but they will have to do it, and I hope that they will do it. It's an opportunity that will not come back. So they have to realize that for years they called for help, and now the U.S. and Israel, made the effort. We sacrificed a lot, and we will create the conditions for them to move forward, but they will have to step up and rise.
We live in a very curious world situation. I'm concerned that both France and Spain have objected to this war, and at the same time, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, now Azerbaijan, are all saying, yes, please go in, please stop this regime from being so aggressive and spreading terror throughout the Middle East. How do you explain the current stance of France and Spain?
Gordon, that's shameful. Shameful to hear those statements. You know, the appeasement ideology of those leaders, it's not working. They think they can play the game with the Iranian regime, make more deals with them. You know, it's shameful. They should know better, because the regime, you know, targeted many civilians also in Europe. And the fact that they actually sent a ballistic missile to Turkey yesterday, it proves that they can reach any destination in Europe. So I ask myself, those leaders, you know, what they are waiting for? And I have to give credit for President Trump, because he chose to face the threat and to neutralize the threat. You know, he could have said, you know what, I will push it and maybe somebody else will handle that. I will sign another empty agreement like the JCPOA. But real leadership is taking the strong decisions that will support your people for the future. Trump took a strong moral decision, but the European leaders, they are doing exactly the opposite. They ignore the reality.
Well, the reality has been an asymmetrical war where Iran essentially gets to do whatever they want, going back to and against U.S. interests. If you take all the various strikes against Israel out of the picture, and those are enormous, but then you just look at the sheer number of attacks against U.S. troops. So all the way back to Beirut and the bombings there, all of the attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq, and then using the Houthis as a proxy, the list of attacks against U.S. ships, U.S. warships is absolutely incredible. And if that isn't a declaration of war by Iran against the United States, I don't know what is. How has Israel dealt with this? Because you're very used to asymmetrical wars, where the other side gets to do as many terror attacks as it wants, but when you move in with force, then the world seems to stand against you, that no, you can't go in and defend your own people. What would you advise the U.S. to do at this point in terms of saying, no, we're justified in doing this? The Iranian regime was the biggest exporter of terror ever in the history of the world, and we're justified in this attack.
We're in the middle of an ongoing conflict. You know, for 47 years, we saw the attacks and the intention, and we actually believe the Iranian. When they chant death to America and death to Israel, we believe them. When they build the ballistic missiles and produced enriched uranium, we believe that when they say that they want to actually assemble it on a the nuclear capabilities on the ballistic missile. So I think that the American leadership today, it's a realistic leadership. They take those threats seriously, and I think that's the way to approach it. Because, you know, go and look at what happened with North Korea. Very similar. There were negotiations, inspectors. One morning we woke up and they announced, that's it. We have a nuclear bomb. We assemble it on a ballistic missile. The same would have happened with Iran unless the US and Israel decided to stop it. And I think today the world should thank Israel. And the German Chancellor Merz said it very nice, that Israel is doing the dirty work for the entire world. We are actually making sure that the world is a safer place for all of us.
Well, I'll be the first to say thank you, and thank you for warning the world. I go back to Netanyahu's speech at the UN, saying that the time was getting very short, and if we allow them to get a nuclear weapon, that changes the entire Middle East. Let's look at the future for the Middle East, and you know, let's look at a future that doesn't include this theocracy of hate from Iran. What's the likely makeup? Are we going to see a new peace, a new Abraham Accord with most of the nations in the Middle East? Or are we going to see yet another attempt to try to create some kind of caliphate?
Well, I think, you know, we can be optimistic about expanding the Abraham Accords. You know, many countries today see the benefits of collaborating with Israel under the umbrella of the U.S., and I think it's meaningful. Regarding Iran, it's too early to know what will happen there. You know, it's a large country, a lot of minorities. It's not clear what will be there, but for sure it will be better than what we had before this operation. Because, you know, to add to this regime with their capabilities, that would have been too dangerous for the world. And, you know, when I see the ballistic missiles flying, every day, as we speak, you have missiles flying all around the region, and I ask myself, if they already had the nuclear capabilities today, they would have been able to control the world. And today, we stopped them right on time.
Are you afraid that there could be a balkanization of Iran? I look at what happened in Iraq, where ISIS rose up in the north, and it followed the U.S. troop withdrawal. Is there any concern there that we could see that nation fracture, and in that fracturing, a whole bunch of new terror groups arise?
We will have to watch it carefully, but I don't think it can get worse than what we are seeing now, because even if it will be decentralized and it's going to be chaotic, still, you're not going to have a regime that is able to send billions of dollars to the proxies, to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis. They are not going to have the capabilities to actually assemble a nuclear bomb. So yes, it might be challenging, for sure the transition period, but you don't have a regime that spends billions of dollars on building those war machines against us. So I think it will be better than what we had before.
Well, Ambassador, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for standing strong in the middle of a lion's den. And thanks especially to Israel. I think you're a light to all of us, and you're a light to the nations. And I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Well, President Trump says he must be involved in choosing Iran's new leader. The president's statement comes as an Iranian dissident warns that Christians could face even more danger if the wrong man takes over Iran. Gary Lane has that story.
3 of Iran's top leaders, those who survived the initial wave of airstrikes that killed the Ayatollah Khamenei, are the only members of the country's leadership council. They are President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chief Justice Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and senior cleric Guardian Council member Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi. Arafi stood close to the former supreme leader.
He has had a particular interest in Christianity, which he calls a rival and a competition to Islam, and he has expressed worries about Christian converts and underground churches more than your average cleric.
Iranian dissident Sheikh Qatari is vice president and senior fellow at the Yorktown Institute.
If you're a Christian, you should be very excited that finally I can come on the ground, go to church if the regime falls. But if the regime survives, and if Arafi, the member of the interim council, becomes the supreme leader, that would be very worrisome.
Troubling because the potential crackdown on Christians could even be more severe than the Ayatollah Khamenei. Also of concern for Christians is Mojtaba Khamenei, the late supreme leader's son, who may likely follow in his father's footsteps. Qatari says despite Khamenei's oppressive policies, Christianity has spread extensively in the country, while the number of adherents to Islam has declined.
The highest estimate was that up to 3 million converts live in Iran, convening in underground churches, which just, you cannot admire the courage of these people enough.
Qatari warns that when the U.S. bombing ends, 90 million Iranians could be swept into a catastrophic civil war. That includes Christians.
You could have a scenario that Iran is dismembered with some portion of the territory held by remnants of the regime, and even asking for foreign militaries like Russia or China or whoever to enter to help them.
Imagine a balkanized country where Turkey moves into Iranian territory. Israel and the Arab states, now united against Iran, could end up turning on each other, with each fighting for a piece of Persia. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, the air dominance is just the beginning of this, and we need to realize we need to be in it for the long haul. This isn't something that is going to easily happen. When you have 2,000 generals of the Republican Guard still there and still on the ground, still controlling troops, when you have the clerics say, we're not going to negotiate with the United States, we're going to elect a new Ayatollah, we're going to rebuild and rebuild our terror regime, that should send a chill through all of us. What happened last June was supposed to get them to give up their nuclear ambition. If you continue down that road, we're going to bomb it. And instead of doing that, it redoubled their efforts. In the negotiations, they led with how many kilograms of uranium they had. And anyone with any physics background knew that if you take that number and then take it to the refining, it'll be 1 week before they had 11 nuclear weapons. That is horrific. That is unimaginable to think that there could be 11 nuclear warheads that could go off throughout the Middle East. So let's be in this for the long haul. Let's realize there's a great moment in time that we can preach the gospel to Iran, that we can see an incredible change where this murderous death cult is forever removed from power and from any kind of position. But if we do it halfway, then we can be assured there'll be an incredible crackback against all of the Christians who are currently there, and it's the fastest growing Christian population on the planet today. There are now 1 million of them. Our Heart for Iran ministry is preaching the gospel through satellite television, through the internet, and then most importantly, we have this wonderful Farsi language prayer center where people in Iran, Christians, can call and receive prayer. At the start of this war, the satellite that carried our signal took down not just us, but every single Farsi language channel that they were operating. We were able to get back up in just 2 days on another transponder. Our audience has found us, and here are the phone calls that we've gotten just this week, just 2 of them, where here's someone saying, let's pray that these days pass safely and peacefully, and that the dawn of freedom rises. Isn't that a wonderful prayer? That's coming from Iran today. Here's another one from Tehran. There have been many attacks in Tehran. However, they've targeted and hit only military centers, and they're not doing anything to the residential areas or civilians. They are safe. The only thing causing anxiety for people is the sound of the explosions. Let's hold on to these prayer requests from Iran. Let's continue to preach the gospel to Iran. Well, let's help the refugees that are leaving and going into Armenia. That's a safe place where we can stage humanitarian relief. When the regime falls, we want to be ready to say, let's do it. Let's, in our generation, let's do it. Let's have a complete change to that country. If you want to be a part of this effort, it's real simple. Call us, 1-800-700-7000. Say, I want to give to Iran. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can call. You can go to cbn.com/Iran. You can put your camera on your smartphone on that QR code. It'll take you to a giving page, and your gift will be designated to Heart for Iran, helping Christians of Iran who need our help right now in this critical hour. Let's preach the gospel now more than ever to the Iranian people. Let them know there's a much better way to go, and what they've experienced over the last 47 years can end. Let's pray for their release. Let's pray for their freedom. Let's pray for our own leaders, and whether it's in the U.S. or in Israel, that they would have the courage to stand up and say, let's finish this job. Let's not do it halfway. Let's not let this terror regime come back and rebuild. Let's do it. Let's free the Iranian people. Call us, 1-800-700-7000.